Amen. Hail, O gracious Lady, who in the flesh bears God for salvation of all, and through whom the human race has found salvation. Through you may we find paradise. Theotokos, Our Lady, pure and blessed. Alleluia, 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 glory to you, our God. Alleluia, 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 glory to you, our God. Alleluia, 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 glory to you, our God.
Awesome. Well, hey everybody. This is the stream of, oh, I think I just saw a lightning flash in the background. Let me pull down my curtain here. This is okay, there we go. This is the stream about kind of my conversion story and like how I became Catholic. I was really taken in by hearing again Spexo's story, which I actually heard, I think, the first time that he ever posted about it. But it really was nice to hear it again and just hear like the massive distance that he had to cross. And I mean, literally, big guy's physiognomy like reflected his change, right? Like he posts that picture of him like smoking the cigarette, looking like almost a completely different person, to then like who he is now, with the giant beard and stuff like that, just like being fit and what have you. So I was so inspired to hear how he had turned his life around. I guess I wanted to give testimony because I love telling stories, and I love kind of talking about my theological development into why I became Catholic. So I guess kind of starting the long story of my life is I was born in a hospital in the city. I was born at an Adventist hospital, and I pretty healthy baby. I don't think there were really any issues at my birth. I think I had like that weird like sickness for a while, like when you're a baby and your skin turns like yellow. I can't remember if it's like jaundice or something, but I think I had that for a portion of time. So like I had to like sleep in a windowsill for a moment because sunlight is a way that I think it gets cured and stuff like that. But that was kind of like after I was born. It was pretty typical, kind of being, born in the city. I was born in, I don't honestly mind doxing this. Most of you people know, but I was born in Colorado. I live in Colorado, and I was born in a great part of Colorado. It was kind of the outlying suburbs. A suburb called Littleton, shortly outside of Denver. And that suburb's really nice. It's low crime, not really tough or anything like that. It's a great place to live, very, very clean, what have you. Now it's super packed. Like in 2008, we had like a ton of Californians and stuff like that move here, and it's like a totally different state. But before then, it was a very low key suburb to kind of live and grow up in if you grew up there like my cousins did. But I lived there for about 2 years. And I lived in this house that all I remember about it is a nightmare that I had when I was a little kid after watching an episode of Thomas, where like Henry the Tank Engine had like a spider dangle in front of him. And then I remember waking up from that nightmare, and my dad comes into the room, where my crib is and stuff like that, and like, holds me. And then another memory I have from my original house is we're sitting at like the coffee table that was, or not coffee table, this long granite countertop. And I was eating a coffee yogurt and remembering how kind of like sour it almost tasted. But it was my first like olfactory sense that I remember ever having a memory of. Besides that, my grandparents will tell this story about how like we had this massive basement and I had like a bounce castle down there, and I would literally like run down the stairs and like launch myself off the stairs and like into the bounce castle. And I would have like my grandpa and my grandma like chase me around and stuff like that, because I loved playing tag growing up. That was like my game. Just super wholesome. Like, you tag your friends. I love to run and stuff like that. So that was kind of my original upbringing. And then when I turned about 3, I moved out of Littleton and kind of to a more sleepy town that I won't say where, but a more sleepy town in Colorado. That's kind of south of Denver. And really, I kind of really fell in love growing up with like living around nature. Nature was a huge part of my upbringing. It was a huge part of like becoming my identity and who I am as a man. Just because living that close to like woods and forests and fauna and all those sorts of natural processes that God puts in this world is just such an eye-opening experience, I would say. So when I moved here as like a 3-year-old, I was blown away. I mean, I had all these like massive woods to play in. I was able to, go on long hikes. There were animals everywhere, bears, deer, what have you. Deer even here will jump in front of your car if you're not careful. So you have to be quite careful on the roads where I live. But it was amazing moving to a new place that really had just unbridled, untamed levels of God's creation. And then soon my baby sister was born. She is the light of my life. In fact, she was the birthday present I asked for my 3rd birthday, because I wanted a sibling, but I specifically wanted a sister. And, she was born, I was born March 6th, 2001. She was born March 2nd. So 4 days apart from my birthday, not 2001, a different year. And it was literally a miracle from God that like she was born so close to my birthday and right on the birthday that I said I wanted a baby sister and stuff like that. And ever since then, she's been really one of the rocks of my life. Like, I don't know what I would do without her. And, not to mention my parents too. Like, my parents raised me to really always strive to be honest, to be really kind to people, to have a sense of loyalty and duty, to kind of demand more of myself than sometimes I'm willing to give. And, really striving for more, I would say is a central tenet of like what I was kind of raised with, right? Like that idea of like, there's more to this life than just doing the bare minimum. And so that was awesome. And so, yeah, my sister was born, and, growing up, my first real foray into faith was I was baptized at a very historical Episcopal church in Georgetown, Colorado, which was literally like constructed like I think like 1845. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful building, just gorgeous. In fact, actually, the Catholic church nearby there had its wood doors come from Rome itself. And when there was a fire that broke out in Georgetown, the fire went up all around the rest of the town, but stopped at the door of that Catholic church. Literally a miracle, right? And that was so incredible to hear. It's like our faith is true or something, right? But yeah, I was baptized at that church, and it was awesome because me, my sister, and all my cousins were all baptized with the correct formula too. So we were all baptized Christians, and that was really powerful. And my grandma, who isn't particularly my other grandma, who's not particularly fond of Catholicism, actually, weirdly enough, gave my sister as a baptismal present like a Catholic book written by like a religious sister. And I was like pouring through it the other day when I was like going down in our basement. I mean, it was just like beautiful, like it was one of those like life books or those DK eyewitness books where there's like a lot of pictures and very little text, but it was just so like beautiful to get to like witness like the very like basic aspects of our faith just expounded upon those beautiful pages, right? Um, so that was kind of my first foray into religion, was being baptized. And then the earliest memories I have of faith are, there was one, and I think I was in like Breckenridge or something, but in the mountains, there's a ton of like really historical, uh, like especially Episcopal churches. And one I distinctly remember, it was very beautiful. It was very like white inside, right? Like the walls were white and everything like that. I was like playing with like the toys of the parish. But I remember kind of the like pastor there, like talking to my parents or something. And I think he said something like positive about me, like, he's a special, little boy, or he's a, bright little boy or something like that. But I just remember like being very happy, like feeling a lot of like joy and love, and kind of also knowing that like I was in a place that was related to Jesus somehow, and like kind of loving that and feeling that love. um and when I got to preschool age, I went to a pretty good, good as in, it's Lutheran, so it's not, not Catholic, but it was pretty, I think, as Orthodox as Protestant as you can get, Lutheran school. And it was really kind of amazing to be at that school because like I really learned about like God's love. Especially I learned that like God loved me and that God created me. And I remember we were doing a Christmas concert one time. I don't know if I remembered this incorrectly, but I swear the chapel we were in, I was standing on stage and we were like singing, and I like remember looking up and looking at like the mural that was painted on the ceiling, and it was quite ornate and beautiful. And it was like a full depiction of like Christ. And I think like angels and stuff like that. And just remembering like how in love I was with him. Like how much I like loved looking at Jesus in that moment. And I just from a very young age had this like positive view of the cross, like imbued in the very essence of my heart. And so that was kind of my earliest foray. I get a little older, and elementary school was really awesome because I grew up in a very close knit community. We were all like family, and it really kind of gave me an appreciation for really like conservative social values. Like, we all knew each other's parents. We all cared about each other. We were all like brother and sister. Like no one really even like none of the girls or boys dated each other because like we regarded each other too highly to like really ever like profane each other like that. It was kind of like a really like based and cool upbringing, and like the community came together and we had these like massive events and stuff like that. It was a really like special time. And I remember being very happy. You know, like I would, run around on the field. And I remember when I was a little kid, I would not really be interested in the other games that kids were playing out on the playground. So I'd make up my own games. I'd like play pretend. And a lot of the kids like were worried about me. They're like, like, why is that kid like playing alone or whatever? But no, I was like having a good time. It wasn't even like sad. It was just like I was having a good old time. Like I'd play like, imaginary Star Wars one day or whatever. And, I always had this like very vibrant imagination that's even to this day, I really still have carried with me. And so it allowed me to like construct these worlds in my head that I could like interact with and stuff like that, even though I knew it wasn't reality. Right. Um, and it was really beautiful. And then, I got to fourth grade and started to play football with the guys, and that really created a great like sense of male fellowship in my life, like understanding like what being like tough meant. You get tackled, you get back up, you know brush yourself off. And we even had a flag football team as a school, and that was a great like that was a great foray into like combat and sports and kind of what it means to be like a man, like a warrior and stuff like that. I really loved that experience, and it meant a lot to me to be able to like exert like my masculinity in such a beautiful way that allowed me to feel like I was really blossoming into the man I would one day become, right? Um, and that was just powerful. But on the theological level, when I was in elementary school, I just knew that I was Christian, but I didn't know that I was Episcopal. I didn't even know what denominations were. In fact, I just knew I was Christian. I knew that I believed that Jesus rose from the dead. I believed all the events of the Bible. As far as I remember, I don't think I denied any of them. One of the things that stands out is that I remember my mom and my dad like showing me like documentaries about the Templar Knights, and saying, and like my dad especially saying how like awesome they were and how cool they were. So I always had like a really positive view of the Templars, and I was like, oh, like those knights are sweet, they're awesome, right? um and so that was my only kind of interaction really with a historical aspect of Catholicism. But what was very interesting is all I remember growing up is whenever I would have like brief interactions with like Catholicism, it was never like negative. Like, even though later in my life I had like a certain negativity distilled in me about Catholicism, I I from a young age like would always look at like things like, for instance, in our state we have the Mother Cabrini shrine because Saint Mother Cabrini like visited here and stuff like that and changed like the lives of like the Polish and Italian miners. And there's a very big marble statue of Jesus on a hill if you're driving, on I think it's C470. And I would always look at that and really like feel kind of like in love with it, like really like that. And I always like liked the iconography. I liked rosaries and stuff like that. I especially really loved Mary growing up, and really throughout my life. And I would never say that there was a period in my life where I ever said that like I thought that like Mary was like idolatrous or anything like that. And in fact, I kind of, when I did get more serious about even my Protestantism, I didn't really ever regard Mary like in a low way at all. Like I thought that like Mary was like beautiful and this vibrant woman, and I never got the hate. I never got the hate that Protestants had for our Blessed Mother. And so she was like a constant in my life of like me loving her and being in love with her. And so whenever I would see a statue of her or whatever, I don't remember a single time where I like thumbed my nose or looked the other way. I just loved her like a lot. And that was really, really special. Um, I think the first time I ever had a negative interaction or a negative interpretation of the Catholic faith was kind of just hearing it in passing, like people just saying like, oh, pedophile priests or something like that. And so, there was kind of that aspect to it. I think also being culturally Protestant too, you just kind of had a negative vibe towards Catholicism because it was like, oh, that, those are the people who did the witch trials or Galileo, or, the Spanish Inquisition or this or that, or paying for indulgences or this other thing. And that was kind of all I knew about the Catholic Church. And I didn't hardly know any other thing than just kind of negative things that they would, depict on screen or what have you. But like even in movies, when they would depict Catholicism, especially in its like medieval sense, I never like hated it still. Like I always like really kind of had like an admiration for it, even if it was like Count Frollo, like even if it was like the worst, depicted man in the world, representing the church in some like artistic portrayal. I couldn't from the bottom of my heart really say that I still hated Catholicism in that way, because like in the depth of my heart, like there was something that I kind of liked about like the dogmatism or like the idea of like standing stalwart for God, because in a lot of Protestant circles, there were always these, sayings that people would drop like, well, God's nice, but we keep religion over here. Or like, well, we don't talk about religion or something like that. And that always really bothered me because I was like, if we actually believe in God and like God exists, like we should be talking about him like all the time. Like as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, we talk about that all the time, or the weather. It's like, why aren't we talking about God, right? And so that really kind of bothered me growing up. And that's why I tended to get along a lot more. I was kind of indoctrinated because it was kind of a lot of liberal Protestant influences on me to begin with, but I kind of, the older I got, started to really warm up to like Baptists and like, I didn't know any really conservative Anglicans, but kind of your more like conservative, non-denominational, like Baptist people. I really always like warmed up to them and stuff like that, and would like kind of comment like, "Oh, I love your crucifix" and what have you. But there was some still mocking sneers and jeers towards those people, like, "Oh, they're dumb rednecks" or something like that. That I started to hear, and when I was young and kind of more liberal and impressionable, I was like, yeah, they're dumb rednecks. But then, the older I got, I was like, wait, like I actually like these people and they're awesome. And so that was kind of my elementary school, faith life. Right. And then when I got to middle school, it got really weird. I had this like odd moment in my life where I started to like veer away from Christianity for some reason, because I think that like the cultural influences of kind of like modern middle school age, kind of when you're getting into your like teen years, didn't like Christianity, but it liked Buddhism, right? Or it liked all these like weird like Eastern religions, largely because of like the kind of Kurt Cobain Nirvana kind of deal, which was what I was into. And I remember kind of 7th, 8th, 9th grade starting to like getting into like really bad religious syncretism. Like I used to literally say that I was like all these different religions and stuff like that. I was like, I'm Jewish and I'm Christian and I'm this and I'm that. And I would like pick and choose like it was candy at the candy store or something. Right. And it was really bad. And then I kind of just settled on saying, oh, well, I'm like Christian and Buddhist, because Buddhism's more of like a philosophy. And I had this heretical belief that like you could choose to be like reincarnated, or you could choose to go to heaven. Right. And that didn't make any sense, but I didn't have any theological backing. So I didn't know what I was saying. I just was kind of saying stuff. And really that was just kind of like my metaphysical concept of reality for those 3 years roughly. It was just this like loose kind of like, I'm Christian. I used to even say like blasphemous stuff. Like I remember distinctly, and this was one of the things I said in my first confession because I felt so bad, that I like mocked Jesus saying like, love your enemies. I was like, I don't get why the Bible says love your enemies. I hate my enemies and stuff like that. And I remembered like even not long even after that interaction, before ever becoming Catholic, I regretted saying that. And I was like, loving your enemies is really good. I think the reason I rejected it when I was at that portion of time is because the way that love your enemies was pitched to me was like, let your enemies like stamp all over you or even like agree with them. And I never like got that. That just seemed like weirdly defeatist. But again, this is like liberal Protestant land where like that's their concept of the commandments, right? And so I didn't realize that like love your enemies means like pray for your enemies conversion, understand that love overcomes evil. And instead, I thought it was like kowtowing or being defeatist or being weak, right? And so that's initially why I said that's such a blasphemous and heinous thing. But I think that was really the only negative comment I said. I also just said other like liberal Protestant nothingisms, like, like, hey man, it's okay to like, the Bible's just a book, and like, it's okay if you're gay or something like that. I used to, be pro-gay and stuff like that when I was really young, because I didn't know what I was talking about. I mean, the way it was pitched to me was like, you either had to like hate these people or like totally accept their lifestyle. And, me being a kid who's only concerns were playing video games and like going to school. I just was like, okay, whatever. But I'll get into when that shifted a little bit later on. One thing, and I don't want to make this the entire episode because I kind of talk about this a lot, but the reason I talk about it a lot is because I really talk about it in order so that people might not make the same mistakes that I do, or that people might know that they're not alone or what have you. But something that I discovered in 7th grade that changed my life in a really negative way was pornography. I remember distinctly, like, it was kind of like a slow like grooming process into that, because it was like, I would watch a lot of YouTube, and I kind of watched a lot of YouTube for like a long time growing up, but it's slow. Like when I started to become like more interested in women and stuff like that, and I inevitably had sort of the natural course that all men take, where, you start noticing girls more, and, what girls have and that sort of thing. I slowly started to kind of like look at more like, suggestive videos on YouTube and stuff like that, like, bikini girl epic fail or something like that, stupid stuff like that. And then I remember one very distinct day where it was like everything changed forever. And I like finally had gotten the gall, not in a good way, in a bad way, to finally just do the deed and look it up. And I typed in that 4-letter word, and when it first appeared, like, I was horrified. Like, I didn't know like what I was looking at. I was kind of like horrified. It was like one of the most visceral things I had ever seen, and like not at all in a good way. Like it really like messed with me to see something like that. To see like nudity and people doing things in such an inappropriate way and stuff like that. I didn't like know what I was looking at, right? And so I close out and I feel guilty, but I felt so much guilt more because I like didn't want to get in trouble, right? I had been raised with a real respect of like my parents, and I hated getting in trouble. Like, if you were to ever ask my mom, like, what does Pinesap hate, she would tell you like getting in trouble with the folks. I hated getting yelled at by my parents. I didn't like being on not on their bad side, but you know what I mean, like having them angry at me. And so when I did something like that, I didn't have the courage to tell them. I was like, I messed up big time, and selfishly at the time, I was like, I had an iPod, and I was iPod Touch, and I was like, I didn't want to get it taken away and stuff like that. And so I just hid, and I just was like, okay, whatever, this is a brush off. But, something else about me is I have a guilty conscience, right? And so when I do something bad and I don't rectify it, the guilt doesn't really go away. So I just kept like in my head, like churning about what I had done, right? And I distinctly remember, and this lasted for years, like a weight in my stomach. Like it felt like I was kind of like always like full, because I felt like so guilty that there was like always like this like knot in my stomach. And it lasted for years, of having this knot in my stomach and feeling like really anxious and like stressed out because of like what I had done. Um, and so I, I had stopped that first time, but it's like because of the guilt and because of feeling like I was already condemned, I kept going back to it. I was like, well, I guess this is just the reality I live in. And, it just started to get progressively worse. I mean, it was like, I would just like look up stuff and look at it for a long time and stuff like that. And then I remember like I wound up feeling so guilty that I was like, I think like off it for a year. But because again, like I had that guilt and I had that like guilty conscience, I could not like get it out of my head. It wasn't even that I liked what I saw. It was just more that like I had felt so guilt ridden from what I did, that it was like I didn't feel like I could live my life ever like any different way. Like I would literally do things and just think about all the time, you did this, you did this, you did this, you did this, and it would like come to define like years of my life that I wish I could get back. that, like, truth be told. Um, and so, seventh to eighth grade, I have that portion of like a year where I'm not like looking at that stuff. Eighth grade, I'll kind of come back to that. Eighth grade, I kind of fell in with like the bad, like kind of goth kids and stuff like that. And I was kind of like, kind of gothy for a while. I never like painted my fingernails or like dyed my hair. I thought that I wanted to dye my hair. Painting fingernails was a little too gay for me. But yeah, I thought I wanted to like dye my hair red, like Kurt Cobain and stuff like that, and be kind of kooky. But I kind of grew out of that by the time I got to ninth grade. Um, Ninth grade was weird because like I used to hang out like at kind of the bottom of the stairs with a bunch of like the theater kids, and oh man, like the drama that would come out of that troop, was really interesting. And so I kind of realized like, these really aren't my people and stuff like that. Yeah. As time went by, I got like my first girlfriend and stuff like that, and, interracial relationship. So it did not last long. I was not into it, never kissed her. I actually full confession, have never actually kissed a girl before. And so, that ended because she was way more into me than I was into her. I was like, as far as it went for me, I was like, this is a girl that's interested in me, and that's about it, right? And so that kind of ended. And when it ended, I remember her breaking up with me, and like I went to the track like practice I had that day, and everyone was like, "Dude, how do you feel, Pinesap?" And I'm like, honestly, I'm kind of chilling right now. Like I just didn't care. And then my sophomore year hit, and I technically dated a girl. We didn't call it dating, but it was like one of those stupid high school things. Like we're not going to put a label on it. And she broke my heart, and yeah, that did hurt. In fact, it did. Because she like ditched me at homecoming, and it kind of like promised a lot. That we were gonna have this like long relationship and stuff like that. It kind of really affected the way that I looked at like women for a while. I was really sad and like had a hard time kind of getting out of that space of being hurt. Because growing up, I had always been like shown movies from like the 80s and the 90s of like romance movies where the guy gets the girl, bests some trial, and they live happily ever after. And I kept asking, I'm like, where's my happily ever after, right? And it took me many years to realize that like what this might sound weird, but like what I was looking for in a woman was actually what I was looking for in God. In the sense of I just wanted someone to love and care about me and care and care that I was there. Not that my parents didn't, not that my sister didn't, not that my family didn't, but in a really like like a really like deep intimate way, not like inappropriate, but like in a way like you're just known, like you have someone who knows who you really are. And it took me years to realize that the only person who can ever do that is God. He's the only person who will ever truly know who you are, right? And it took so long for me to realize that, and I had kind of this like simpy attitude for a while where I thought like, oh, if I have this girlfriend, like everything's going to be awesome. Everything's going to be cool, and it's going to be my happily ever after and stuff like that. And, truth be told, I still have to struggle through kind of that mindset sometimes where it's like, you see a girl and you fall for a girl and you're like, oh, she's awesome and stuff like that. It's gotten a heck of a lot better, but it's still a temptation nonetheless. And so that was a tough struggle, but, kind of getting back full circle to that issue. So, the year had passed where I was porn free. And then I slowly but surely kind of fell back in my my old habits, and, wound up kind of relapsing. And this time around, it got bad because I was kind of like hold no bars. You know what I mean? Like before I was kind of like wary of things like viruses and stuff like that. So really it was just kind of light, but like it kind of just got to a point where it was like, I literally would show up from school, and I would watch it for like 5 hours, and basically like blow the entire day. Um, there was like one distinct memory I have of like my sister wanting to like play a game with me or something. And I like kind of told her like, yeah, I'll like be, ready in a minute. And I like, was doing what I was doing. And like, I totally missed that time. And like, I remember her being sad after and being like, you never like played that game with me. And so the time I lost from that is not something I'll ever get back. I had a group of friends that I didn't wind up being friends with anymore. And, for better, not for worse, there's a reason why those relationships end. But, another instance, they wanted to play Xbox Live with me. And I told them, yeah, guys, I'll be on. And I was doing the other thing. Right. And the night ended and we never did play. That could have been one more memory, one more laugh, one more smile that I could have had with them, and I never did. And so it really became a big part of my life in not a good way. And then ninth grade passed, and kind of the allure of high school wore off. I had kind of I had checked all the boxes and, had kind of my freshman honeymoon with high school. And by the time I got to sophomore year, I was like, this is just kind of the same old, same old. And by this point, like, I started to kind of wean off of the whole Buddhism thing and stuff like that. It just didn't do it for me anymore. But what I started to get into was almost like full on existential crises, like every day. Like literally thinking that like in a moment the universe was going to collapse and I was just going to die. I remember, I would watch these like top 10 videos growing up because they were really popular, like Watch Mojo or something. And like, I would watch ones about like top 10 ways the scientists will say the world will end or something. And literally like thinking for the like the rest of the day, like, this is going to be how everything ends, right? I'm just going to be like sitting in a classroom and suddenly like everything will go into eclipse and collapse. And I'm just going to be killed and crushed and not know what happened. And I got really, really, really stressed out. And I would have to like leave the classroom and literally go to the bathroom and just like splash my face with water and like sit there for a moment and then like regain composure to be able to come back. The issue and my addiction got so bad that, and that probably was honestly contributing to kind of the feelings of existential crisis, that I remember, I don't know if it was one day or 1 week or what have you, but I literally remember waking up and thinking like, I don't want to be alive anymore. I had no plans to take my own life. I had no plans to commit suicide, but it was like there was a complete loss of like any will like to live at all. I literally remember like going to class, showing up, getting my work done, going home, doing the heinous thing, feeling guilty, going to sleep, going to class. And it was like, that was every day for me. And I would like listen to like really depressing music to try and like have some like semblance of like something that could relate to me or relate to how I felt. And it got so bad that like the thoughts of like just not wanting to like be alive anymore literally ate away at me to the point where I like went up to my mom and we like drove down to this lake nearby our house, or this creek, and they have a little parking lot for the like playground. And I look at her and I'm like, Mom, I don't want to be alive anymore. I feel like I want to take my own life. And she broke down crying. Um, and we went home and we talked a long time. Um, and my dad came in, and my dad, rightfully so, is always wary of like therapy stuff, because literally people get like thrown on like drugs and stuff like that, like going into those therapy offices, like it's so bogus and whack. But like my dad was like really concerned for me, and like really was willing to do anything to like help me out. Um, but I didn't have the strength to tell them what I had been doing, because I thought that I was so disgusting and beyond reproach that no one could help me. Um, and so I went to the therapist, and we had like, I think like met like 3 or 4 or 5 times. And every time like we would just kind of talk, and I just said that like I was like listening to like too depressing of music, that like my friends sucked, or I was just sad because I was growing up, or my ex-girlfriend had hurt me or something like that. But like, as much as that might have added to anything that I had going on, that wasn't the reason why. The reason why I didn't want to live anymore is because my life literally felt like a living hell. It felt like a tape that you would put in and rewind every single day, of me waking up, going to school, being completely just like zonked out of my mind and not caring about anything, going home, watching pornography for like 5 or 6 hours, and then going to bed. And I didn't know how to tell that to anybody. I didn't know how to like share that, or like say like I need help. Um, I thought that like if I told someone, that they would just like mock me or like laugh at me or be like, "You're so disgusting and gross. Like, why would you ever do something like that?" And I just remembered lying, like lying through my teeth to everybody that I cared about, because I didn't have the strength to be able to like choke out the words like, "This is literally making me like not want to live anymore. I hate myself because of this." And it gave me like a ton of image issues. Like I couldn't like look at myself in the mirror. I couldn't talk to women at all. Um, I used to be able to like, at that point I'd been able to like talk to girls like all my life, like it was nothing, right? And then it was like suddenly something changed, and it was like I felt like guilty like talking to like every woman that I used to have normal conversation with, and I didn't feel like I could enjoy family functions or like hangouts with friends or anything like that. Um, and so literally my life was like a living hell every single day. And I just had this knot in my stomach. I would like, eat something and feel like full already, because of how like I was just knotted up, and I felt so guilty for what I had done, that I had like no way to like share with anyone how I felt at all. Um, and so, I kind of like lied to the therapist. I told her all this stuff, and she was like, we'll do like hypnotherapy or whatever. And, it wasn't anything crazy. It was just like, I want you to think about like a happy place or something. And it actually did help in some sense of like being able to like struggle maybe with some anxiety and stuff like that. And, it definitely alleviated some things, but like I was still struggling with this issue. And like I thought to myself, I don't have any like reason, like why am I here struggling with this, and like why does life suck so much? Like I didn't feel like I had any purpose for why I was there. I felt like the rest of my life was literally just going to be like, you know, get a job, get a white picket fence, get a wife, get kids, die, and that was it. And not that all those things are bad, but it was like just checking boxes. It was just like, okay, I got this thing, on to the next, and like nothing felt like it had any meaning to it. And so I was incredibly still depressed. I didn't want to hurt myself because like the very thought of um the very thought of having to like leave my sister and my mom and my dad, I couldn't bring myself to do that. Oh man. I couldn't bring myself to do that. So I had to just keep kind of trucking on. Um but man, was it tough. It was so tough. I didn't want to live for myself anymore. I had zero regard for anything that I had going on. I didn't care about myself at all. And I literally would have these like fantasies about like dying and everyone showing up to my funeral and then being like thrown on the ground and forgotten. And man, that was life. And I just felt like in this like such this like deep dark pit of like nothing mattered whatsoever. And it felt like impossible to be able to claw out of that. And then I don't know who it was. I don't know what moment it was, but there was some moment in which I think it was my mom had said, this year for Christmas, I want us to go to church together. And we went to the Episcopal church, not too far from our house, and it was more liberal or whatever, but there were some beautiful aspects to like the liturgy and stuff like that, that really like brought me in, and like I really rekindled a love that I forgot was there. And I realized like in that moment that the person that I needed the most was Jesus this entire time. And that this entire time, like while I was suffering, he wasn't far gone from me, even though I turned my back on him. That was the biggest regret of my life. Sorry. That was the toughest part, was realizing that I had kind of left him in the dust, and that I had left him behind, and like seeing like a candle vigil, like a Christmas service, like reminded me of like why I fell in love with God when I was a little kid, when I was a little boy, and why I would always look at images of Jesus and feel like comforted and like not put out. Why I remember, screaming and crying watching movies of him being like crucified and wishing I was there to stop it. It was like everything in that moment had reached an omega point where like I had remembered someone who was always there for me and had always been there. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry. And it really just hurt that I didn't know this before, and that there were so many moments in my life where I felt like I was alone and struggling with something and suffering in something, and like realizing that he was there carrying me the entire time, really got to me. So after that candle vigil, I asked my mom for her Bible. It was a New King James Version Bible. It had her name on the front, and she even had like a schedule in there for when my sister had been going also to a religious preschool. I think that was a Presbyterian one. And she had like a schedule in there for Bible study. And I remember like reading Genesis, and the moment that like God breathes out over the water and he creates everything and forms everything, like I just imagined that all that had ever existed and all that ever was his love. That like nothing exists outside of love. And it reminds me of something that I heard in Saint Charbel Mabluff's book about, he takes Genesis and he says, in the beginning there was love and nothing existed outside of love and nothing does exist outside of love. And like hearing that be expounded upon in Genesis and seeing and just asking for the first moment in my life, why did God make everything? It like transformed my world. I realized that like I was made for love, and I was like made to love him, and that he loved me, and that he suffered on the cross for me and died for me. And I like would read scripture and just be so enamored by like Moses and the struggles of the Egyptians and the fleeing from Egypt and everything, that like I like died and I was reborn that day, you know? Like I felt like I was a new Pinesap. I didn't feel like I was the kid who played video games anymore to escape reality. I felt like I wanted to like enjoy like what God had given me, this life. And so for the first time, like I realized why I was here. I realized like everything that I'd ever felt that was missing from my life was finally encapsulated in such a meaningful way. And I didn't have any other reason to live but for him and for what he had given me. And not, not to mention, too, while all this was going on, I was still in high school and the culture war was going on. And, at first, like, when Gamergate happened, video games were under attack. So I got into really politics from that moment. And I was like, we got to defend the video games against the SJWs and stuff like that. But then I started to ask deeper questions of the heart, like, why is all this happening? And like, why is all of this going on? And I started to see a theme, like in politics, of noticing that I was like more attracted to like Christian political philosophers, but specifically Catholic ones. Like there would be someone like, Bishop Robert Palmer, or whatever his name is, from like the Anglicans, right? And he would kind of say this thing about like, oh yeah, we need to be generically Christian, or like the Puritans. But then like someone like Joseph Damast would like literally say like all of the earth should profess Christ's name. And I was like, I want that to be like who I am politically. And so I really got into like Edmund Burke and like all these philosophers. And I asked my mom, I'm like, what are we? And she was like Episcopalian. And so I started to get more into Episcopalianism. That stopped short pretty quick because I realized that like they dissented on like all biblical things. So I was like, okay, I'm not Episcopalian. I called myself Anglican instead, because the way that, Protestant, being in communion with the church and Protestantism is like just deciding what church you want to go to a different Sunday. It's not any formal process, right? So I said, okay, well, I'm Anglican. I'm the OG traditional guys. And, I bought a book. I asked for a book of common prayer for Christmas, and my parents so lovingly, got me one. And I asked for a King James Version Bible, and I started to read more and stuff like that. But what really struck me was like, I didn't have any answers to like how to do biblical exegesis. Like I would go on these Protestant forums all the time, and they would argue about like how to interpret the Bible. And you'd have people who would argue literally like how to, how like the Bible was like pro-gay and like you have to let in all immigrants and stuff like that. And then, the more correct people who are like, no, that's all BS and stuff like that. But there was like no authority except just trying to appeal to scripture. And that got me really like kind of a little like scrupulous, because I was like, how do I know if I'm following God? Like, this person says that person says this. I'm like, I'm just like making it up as I go, right? And so, I kind of tried to consult, more of kind of the Anglican church stuff. But then, like, whenever I would ask a question, it would always consult me. Well, okay, this guy wrote some stuff that answers a lot of questions. I'm like, oh, who is he? Oh, he's John Henry Newman. Oh, well, let me look at his bio. Wait, he became Catholic? What? Dude, traitor, schismatic, heretic. No, I'm not Catholic, right? And yeah, I like doubled down on being anti-Catholic and stuff like that, because especially in the Anglican world, there's this like understanding that like to be Anglican is to be like British and English, and like, that's my culture, my heritage. And so like the very thought of like Catholicism, there's this like low key, even in Episcopalianism, like this low key like ethnic prejudice towards like Catholics, because it's like, oh yeah, they're like Spanish and swarthy and like Italian, and we're like the country club Anglo people who like built this country, so they kind of needed to go over there. And it was kind of that like WASP culture, right? Um, and so I kept pushing it back. And I just kind of stuck with the Bible for a while and just was like, whatever, I'm just going to read scripture. That's the only foundation of everything. So I would just read scripture, and I was kind of timid about it. I was kind of almost more into politics at that point. And as time went on, I got to college finally. I graduated high school. I got to college, and I was like a super conservative at this point, like very, very conservative. I started to not really dig Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder as much. I just found them to be kind of constantly apologizing. I even remember saying, like, without watching anyone, even like Nick or whatever, just saying to myself, like, I get tired of how they like apologize all the time, or like try to like appeal to like left-wing sensibilities. I was like, that's kind of gay. Like, I don't really like that. We should just be who we are, right? Um, and so I get to college, and I show up to Turning Point USA, and the first thing they ask is, they're like, guys, we're gonna go around the table. What's your political ideology? And I literally, and again, guys, I did not watch Nick at this point, and this is not me trying to brag about I got the bigger balls or anything like that. It's nothing like that, or like I'm some Chad or anything like that. But like I didn't even know about Nick Fuentes at this point. But as they're saying their different ideologies, and all of them are like libertarian, Republican, this thing, I literally fold my arms and I'm like, I'm a Christian ultra nationalist. And they're like, dude, bro, what? Dude, you can't be that, bro. The Constitution, dude. And like, I sat back with a king's smile on. I was like, I love defending like that kind of sensibility. And so like I was already pretty right-wing in my politics. I really loved like the kind of reactionary figures, like I said, Joseph Damast. And I even started to like Thomas Aquinas and Augustine, and I'm not saying saint at this point, but they are saints. I just mean at that point, I just knew them as Thomas Aquinas, Augustine, not Saint Augustine, Saint Thomas Aquinas. But I get to school, and I'm trying to figure out like, how do I want the next 4 years of my life to be? And I'm like, I want them to be faithful. So I'm like, okay, where do I go? And I'm in the school auditorium when we're doing the club pick out, and I see the Protestant club, which is CRU, CRU, and literally they have an all is welcome banner, full rainbow, full, gay pride, whatever that crap. And I literally looked at that and said, yeah, no. Oh, by the way, quick story. The way I became homophobic is I literally opened the Bible, saw Leviticus, and I'm like, well, I believe the Bible. And I kind of have always been low key disgusted by like gay stuff. So then I was just like, yeah, I'm homophobic. So that happened also kind of my junior year, my sophomore year of high school. So, that was a long in the making. And so when I saw CRU promote that, I was like, no, this is not for me. And then I go around and I see the Catholic club on campus, and they're like based, like the brothers and the priests are wearing full oh my goodness, what is it? Not habits, but the full get up, right? Like, they whatever it's called. I think habits, yeah, or not monk habits, but you know what I mean, like the full like priestly outfit, right? And there's the Sisters of Life there too, and they're awesome, and you know they're like, hey, come join the Catholic Club, and I was like, shoot, I mean, I agree with you guys on a lot of stuff, so I'm like, shoot, why not? And so I get a flyer, go back, and then they're having mass that Sunday, so I go to mass, and my priest, Father Paul, who is doing ministry, the mass is being done. And what blew me away is it was a Novus Ordo mass, and I like loved it. Like I literally fell in love with the mass so much at that point. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is literally like beautiful. And this will surprise everyone. It had guitar, there were guitars in the mass, and I thought it was awesome. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. But then we get up to the Eucharist, Holy Communion, and I'm told, Father Paul makes an announcement to the audience, and he says, if you're Catholic, you can come and receive. If you're not Catholic or Catholic and not prepared to receive, I ask you to cross your arms to receive a blessing. And I literally remember walking out, I'm like, what is this BS papist crap? And I like walk out, I storm out, I'm like, like they think they can turn me down. They don't even think I'm Christian. I'm angry. I'm pissed off. And like, I walk away, and some time passes. And I remember watching a Father Mike Schmitz video about why that wasn't allowed. And like the way that he like explained it is he's like, it's good that you're mad. And I was like, good that I'm mad? What are you talking about? And he's like, it's good that you're mad because it means that you like want to be Catholic. Like you want to be a part of the mystical body and receive Jesus's body and blood. And I was like, oh, that actually kind of makes sense, even though I don't agree with it. And I was like, okay, like I don't agree with that, but like that's fair enough. And I kind of became more ecumenical at this point, but I was still pretty anti-Catholic. Me and my friend James, like we went to a coffee shop, and I remember sitting him down. I'm like, James, listen, I'm in the Catholic club, but I'm never going to become Catholic, bro. That's not it. I'm not going to become Catholic or anything like that. So time passes. I get busy. I stop going to mass, and I'm just like hanging out in my dorm or whatever. I remember a very distinct miracle though that happened, in which I had a test, like a surprise quiz that had popped up in math class, and I was not doing good, and college was not going good. I was like in my third week, and I didn't have any friends, and I was kind of freaked out. And I literally remember praying, because I didn't know this test was going to happen. I like didn't study for it. I prayed to our Lord. I was like, Lord, like please help me tomorrow. Like I'm scared. And like I didn't have a good grade in this class. It was like a C, because I did like awful on like the first homework, and I was like, Lord, please help me. The next day I do the test. I'm stressed out. I'm like, oh, dude, I don't know how that went. Maybe it went well. I guess I felt kind of well on it. I get it back. It's a 95%, and I got an A+ on it. And for the rest of the course, like I had gotten A's, and I was doing really, really well, and everything started to change for the better. And I was like, thank you, Lord. Like, this is awesome. And I never forgot that miracle that he gave me. Cause I was, screwed up, Schitt's Creek without a canoe, without a paddle. Right. And the Lord gave me this great miracle, and like just made, the rest of that like quarter just so much better for me. And so, to get back to the story, I stopped going to mass for a while and stuff like that. And I'm just hanging out, I'm living my life, and COVID hits. And at first, we hear, and I'm sure you guys all remember where you heard it too, weird Chinese flu, and I remember reading on Breitbart, because I read Breitbart at the time, and I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. Okay, weird Chinese flu. I remember there was that like Black Plague virus that like broke out in 2013. I was like, this ain't gonna be nothing. And then literally like 2 weeks later, they're like, yeah, this like Corona thing is like serious, and we're shutting down school. And I was like, what? I'm like, I don't get to have my like the rest of my freshman year. And they're like, no, it's all going to be online. And so I pack up my things. I kind of give a sorrowful goodbye to, all the friends I had made and stuff like that. I was like, oh man, like, that this kind of sucks. And we go online. It of course blows. It blows chunks. It's awful. Like I sit there literally in my basement, like not even half listening to the class most of the time. I'm like, this just sucks. This is awful. Right. Um, but what it allowed for that changed my life was a lot of introspection. Like life slowed down and I had like a lot more time to like think about everything. And I had like a lot more time to like process out like why, like okay, I'd kind of put off my faith to the side just because I got busy, right? I was kind of praying here and there, but like I kind of brought that out of the foray, and everything suddenly has been taken from me. What matters? It's like God matters, right? God's been here this entire time, and He's the only thing that matters. But I was still like incredibly frustrated because before school had left, I had a friend named Mike who was a former I have a friend named Mike who's a former Anglican, and he started like challenging me on stuff. And I got into like branch theory, and I was like, dude, like Anglicans, the Eastern Orthodox, and Catholics, we're and Lutherans, whoever you are, if you're Christian, you're the true church. And he's like, well, not exactly, Pinesap, and like started to kind of like challenge me on this. And I was like, no, dude, that's stupid and stuff like that. And then when I get into COVID, suddenly like I have a lot more time. I'm spending a lot more time on YouTube or something, and I see like on my feed like Catholic Answers and Dr. Taylor Marshall's like early work, right? Before he was kind of doing the church drama stuff, like his earliest stuff, like St. Thomas Aquinas Institute stuff. And I'm like watching this stuff, and like suddenly my world's being changed. And I'm like, wait a minute, like what? Like, Matthew 16:18, that's incredible. And like there's 7 books left out of my Bible. And I started to like look up like Anglican apologetics, and they sucked. Like there was literally one forum I went on, and there was like an Anglican dude who literally said, yeah, I'm basically an atheist, but like I really like the smells and bells. And I'm like, I'm like, no, I don't want this anymore. So I remember being in my basement after class had ended, and I wasn't listening. I was reading theological stuff. And I kneel down and I say, Lord, I don't care where I need to go. I don't care if I need to be a Pentecostal or a Mormon or what have you. I said, I just want to know your true church. Boy, did that prayer change my life forever. I, not long after that prayer, looked into the Deutero canon, the 7 Deuterocanonical books. And what was funny was that it was not the first time I had looked into them, because Anglicans knew it as Apocrypha, right? Like, oh, these are like just kind of they might be kind of inspired or poems or whatever, but we don't really know. And I had actually originally tried to get a KJV Bible with Apocrypha in it, right? But it didn't work out. And then I look at the Deuterocanon, I'm like, wait, like everything's lining up. And so I'm like really stressed out. Like, there's kind of this Protestant, voice still speaking in my ear. And I call my friend Mike, and I'm like, Mike, are 7 books missing from my Bible? And he's like, yes, Pinesap, 7 books are missing from your Bible. And I talked a little bit more, and I put down the phone. I like put my head in my hands, and I was like, I literally didn't want to be Anglican anymore. I had like no desire to. Like I was reading about like medieval Europe, and I was like reading about like Pope Innocent III was a huge influence on me. And I was reading about like what he did with like the Fourth Lateran Council and stuff like that. And I was reading about the Templars and the Crusaders, and I was like, what religion are they? And they're like all Catholic. And reading one historical article on Anglicanism shattered it for me. I was like, there was no reason that this should have happened. This fat ass, excuse my language, but that's what King Henry VIII is, a fat ass, was like just wanting to be a coomer and divorced his wife over it. And so literally split off of the Catholic Church. I'm like, I can't be Anglican anymore. This is like, I don't want to be. I have no desire to be anymore. And I was reading about like Pope Benedict XVI's like personal ordinariate for former Anglicans. And I was like, they're literally calling me back home. I mean, there were Anglo-Catholics that said like, yeah, the Anglo-Catholicism is dead, dude. Just convert to Catholicism. And I was like, everything was lining up. And I was like, I have to become Catholic now. There's just no other way. And I remember telling my folks and my sister after that, and it was tough news for them to bear. My mom was really upset and she cried and stuff like that. My heart broke when she said, we're not going to be in heaven together. And I said, yes, we will. Will her away. Through hanging on a prayer. I have a feeling everything will work out. And I think at first a lot of people thought it was just a phase, but it didn't go away. It just grew. And I really, 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 really started to get involved with like wanting to become Catholic, right? And I started to watch more Taylor Marshall, and suddenly I was watching more of his kind of church drama stuff, and slowly I got thrown kind of in that weird mad trad world. And so I was not Catholic at this point. I wasn't even a catechumen, right? And I was already saying things like I already had an opinion on Vatican II and the Novus Ordo and stuff like that, and all this stuff. And I was already buying books from Archbishop Lefebvre. This is the first book I ever bought from him. This is actually one of the only books I've ever read through entire cover to cover. I've read this entire book. I thought he was like a saint and stuff like that. And so I was saying all these things, and I wasn't even Catholic yet. But as I got closer to that Lent that changed my life of my sophomore year of college, when we actually got back in person, I actually watched Spexo's videos at that time, and that was my first encounter with Spexo. And he for me was just like the cherry on top. He just added like extra reasons for me wanting to be Catholic. But I remember, starting my catechumenate, RCIA thing, already being like, Vatican II sucks and it's awful and I hate it and stuff like that. And, all these opinions and what have you. But something that was very interesting is at this time, I had actually gotten Telegram. And I was on Telegram a lot, and as I kind of said before, I was becoming less kind of like a neocon and a cuck-servative, like slowly and slowly and slowly, to the point where, I got Telegram, and I need to tell you guys my first interaction with the Groiper, but I'll wait on that. I got Telegram, and my first real interaction on it was just getting inundated with a lot of Wignat stuff, and it was a massive 180 shift in everything I had ever known, right? I mean, I remember, this is not Wignat, this is actually fine, but I remember picking up E. Michael Jones' book, Revolutionary Spirit, right? And I remember reading that book thinking I was going to disprove it like Mark Shea. Mark Shea didn't disprove it, but thought he did, right? And I remember pouring through that book and not being able to disprove a single thing it said. And so I was getting inundated with a lot of red pills and stuff like that. Really not even too much, but just not being able to even really sift through, the content and stuff like that. But before I go to that, I'll tell my first interaction with the Groiper. So Will Witt was speaking at my school, and there was a kid who actually, you'll actually be able to look him up. This isn't a dox or anything like that. His face is from Groiper War One. When Charlie Kirk spoke at I think it was either CU, University of Colorado, or Colorado State University, CSU. He's the kid who kind of looks like Patrick Bateman with the slicked back hair and the nice coat and stuff like that. I won't say his name or anything. But that kid was actually the first Groiper I had ever interacted with. And I didn't even know what Groipers were. And he was there to kind of groip Will Witt. And he was pretty good. He tried to groip Will Witt, but Will Witt kind of wasn't really like playing ball. He just kind of gave him like a non-answer. He was just like, yeah, I think a lot of good options there or something. And it was just like, shut it down. And I remember, when I first started to hear about groipers, like someone was like, did you hear what Sebastian Gorka said about them? And literally, like, I had played for me the clip of him being like, this disgusting anti-Semite Nick Fuentes and stuff like that. And so, like, at first, because I was still kind of a normie, I was like, yeah, like, Nick's bad. But weirdly enough, I, like, agree with him on, like, everything that he's saying. But yeah, he's bad. And so when I got Telegram and I started to get, like, more inundated, I was like, yo, am I like just a groiper now? Not the Wignat stuff, but like the actual groiper stuff. I was like, I think I'm like a groiper. Like I like the like America First movement now and stuff like that. I'm like, what groiper, dude? I was like, already posing. I was already doing my little groiper thing. And I like the fact that finally there were like other kids like me, because I thought I was like literally the only person on the planet that liked guys like Joseph Damast and like the reactionary people. And I see this kid getting online and talking about like all those same figures and like the exact same like politics that I have. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like it was literally a life changer. And then, not too long after that, that's when I found Spexo, because I was trying to find like other AF content creators. And I was like, okay, this guy's awesome. He's based. He's also religious too. Like it wasn't even just like memes. It was like actual like religious content, like something to like sit on. And I was like, like I like this a lot. But, full circle, getting back to the whole like kind of Wignat thing. I was never like anti-AF during that period. I my anti-AF phase was just initially when I was introduced and I was still a normie, but I was never anti-AF after that. But what started to happen is like, you go on these Telegram channels and it's like greatest story never told and like Sparrow Patria, like, dude, listen to this based Hitler speech and stuff like that. And like, I never from the bottom of my heart like hated anybody, but like I started to literally see things like in like a race war like lens, right? Like I was like, we whites got to stick together because the other races are out to get us and stuff like that. And like, it's going to come down. There's going to be blood in the streets, man, if you're not careful and stuff like that. And I was like really angry. Like I got like really, really, really mad. And I was seeing a lot of stuff that I like didn't know what was true and what was false. I didn't know like how to handle all the new information I was getting, some of it true, some of it false. And I was just really angry. And this was like all during the time that I was like being in the church and I started the RCIA process. And that was kind of rough because, I was still struggling with my, my addiction and stuff like that. But, things were lessening and getting better with the grace of Christ. And then I remember, going through RCIA and we're going through the catechism lessons and stuff like that. And everything's great. Everything's cool. I'm doing it, and all that. And then I remember going to my first confession, and I've told this story, I think either on stream or like on Telegram, but I go to my first confession and it's with Father John, and Father John's like, Pinesap, I'm so happy that like you choose me to do your like first confession and stuff like that. I'm like, you're literally like my spiritual father. Like, of course I would. I wouldn't do my first confession with like anybody else. Right. But I was like, oh boy, man, do I have a lot of stuff to sift through. So the full confession was like 2 hours, like 2 hours and 15 minutes. I think it was a long time because I was covering everything I'd ever done in my life. And I remember that like there was a point in the confession when I feel this like weird movement in my heart that like what I was doing and what I was seeing on Telegram was like not what Christ was calling me to. And I like say to Father John, I'm like, Father John, like, I like am really angry. And like, I feel like the only way to like defend myself is like, if I like, it really was like American History X, like I never shaved my head. I never had like a swastika or anything like that, and it really, again, from the bottom of my heart, I didn't hate anybody, but I was like, I was just so angry. Like, I was so angry seeing like white people being discriminated against and stuff like that. But I didn't know how to approach that in the right way. I'm still angry about that, but like I have the right approach to that, which is love, not hate, right? And I was filled with like just anger and hatred, and I hated this person, I hated that person. I wanted to just destroy everything. And I remember looking at Father John and saying like, I'm angry. And then I'm like, I don't know what to do. And he says to me, because I was just so inundated from anyone who had the label Christian, I was so inundated with getting like propaganda of like white people are bad and need to apologize and stuff like that, that I was expecting. I was like, oh boy, here comes the PC. I need to understand my racial privilege or something like that. And he doesn't say that. He says, oh, my sweet boy. And he like gets down. I'm like kneeling down, and he like hugs me and like cradles my head. And I gonna try not to cry again. And it was like everything in my life at that moment like changed. Like, I didn't feel hated. I didn't feel despised. I didn't feel like everyone was my enemy for a moment. I felt like someone like loved me and actually heard for the first time, related to this issue, like what I was saying and what I was like frustrated with and what I was so angry about. So angry that I wanted to just destroy and tear up everything, not do anything illegal or anything like that, but like that I just wanted to knock all systems down. I wanted to tear everything up and, make it anew in my image. And it was like having someone who like didn't lecture me, didn't like look down at me or anything like that, meant the world to me. And he looks at me and he says, God made white people. God made all races, and all races are loved by him. And he loves all races. And the part that really got me is he said, he made you a white man. He didn't make any mistake in that. And I like, for the first time, like, it went back to that moment in Genesis, right? Like, God made creation because he loved everything. And it was like, God made my people, my friends, my family, the smiling faces that I look at, those people, my kin, and loved them. And I was like, I had never heard someone in my entire life say that. And I was so angry because I felt like everyone just hated the things that I cared about and wanted to hurt the people that I cared about. And I have someone who said that God is on your side and loves you, not in the Wignot way, but in the way of like, God loves you and he's not going to let your people go because he made your people. Like, it changed my world, man. It changed my world. And he said, but he told me this. He said, God made, and he said, it's good to feel angry at the discrimination. But he said, Pinesap, if you use the tools of hate that have made you feel this way, you're only going to make the world a worse place. You're not going to make it better. He said, I don't want you to go down this path anymore. I don't want you doing something that's going to turn your life upside down. And I looked at him and I promised him that I wouldn't. And to this day, I've done a total 180 from that. And I remember not long after that, we get finished, and that sweet man, I love with all my heart. He is such a good spiritual father. We hugged, and I walk outside and I like look up at the sky, and I just, for the first time in my life, feel like there's been a weight lifted off, and like I feel free. And I like go back and I start deleting all the crap off of my phone. And I'm like, I don't like this stuff. And even before becoming Catholic, I was like, you know what? Like, I might have kind of my issues with Vatican II, but I'm like, it's valid. I accept it and stuff like that. And, I don't care. I'm just Catholic and what have you. And I go up, and I remember being let into the church, at an Easter vigil, and I'm sitting on the kneeler, and I say that, I believe everything that the Catholic Church teaches. And the moment that the Eucharist touches my tongue, I'm like, that's that is Christ's flesh. Like, that's real. That is like nothing I've ever experienced in my life. And it like changed, like, I can't even have words to compare to like how much it changed my life the first time actually receiving Christ's body and blood. It changed me. And I was like, I was a new man at that point. Like, I was literally reborn, you know. I like abandoned my old life. I stopped playing as much video games. I, you know, kind of got rid of all the stuff that I had, you know, used to hold on to and stuff like that. And, you know, really things started to go good in a way. And I was happy, you know, I was happy to be Catholic. And so, you know, that goes on for a while, and that was close because it was Easter, it was close to summer, right? So I, you know, I'm Catholic for a couple months, and, you know, I'm just going to mass and doing all that. But then summer hits, and while I had kind of come around on Vatican II a little bit, or just said like, whatever, I accept it, I was still like very much a mad trad. Like, I still like read The Remnant. I still read 1 Peter 5. I still read the Angelus all the time. And like, I wouldn't even read stuff from the Vatican. I would go to those sources to like be like, this is how I have to think about it, right? Like, oh, I can't trust the Vatican. I need to like go through those things in order to understand, because like I had such a fear that like if I didn't, like, I literally was going to be embracing some heresy, and like that freaked me out, man. Like, that freaked me out. And so I was doing all that, and I was like, you know, I really want to visit a society chapel. And so in my state, you guys, if any of you have watched the SSPX Crisis in the Church series, you would know him. I don't mind saying his name. I have nothing bad to say about him. He's very, very nice. Never did anything wrong. He has impeccable conduct. But Father Paul Robinson was the like main priest for Colorado, the Society Chapel that we have here. So I like looked him up. I was like, you know, hey, can you know, Father Paul can or Father Robinson, can we talk on Zoom? And so we talked on Zoom, and like I kind of bonded over like, you know, oh, they're, you know, my college is so liberal and stuff like that. He was very nice, and, you know, kind of answered some questions that I had and stuff like that. And so, you know, I get to summer, and I started attending the Society Chapel and stuff like that. And the first time that I went, it was not a mass, but it was like Vespers or something, and like we're all like, everything's very ornate, like everything's very beautiful, and everything looks great, right? Um, but I just felt like from like some part of my heart that like I didn't belong there, like that wasn't a place I should be. It was very odd. I was like, okay, I've read all the, like, I read the Father Z article. I read the, you know, Remnant stuff. Like, why do I feel like this? I said, you know, it's just jitters or whatever. And, you know, I'm sitting there, and I brought my buddies along who were not yet Catholic. And, you know, I was telling them stuff like, yeah, there's some goofy stuff going on in the church, whatever. And one of the women who was at the chapel, like, we were kind of talking to her after, and my friend just like asks kind of in a joking manner, he's like, what do you think of the Novus Ordo? And she literally, I'm not even kidding, like lightning struck in a moment, says that is a false church. Like that is like cancerous. Like, that is like a false church, and it's wrong, and it's evil and stuff like that. Like, lightning struck her. And like, I was kind of aghast. Like, you know, I used to like complain about the Novus Ordo, but I like never said anything like that. I was like, oh, like, dang, that's a little too racy even for me, right? And I'm like, well, you know, whatever, to each their own. And, you know, so I keep attending. And then over that summer, Traditionis Custodes drops. And the morning it dropped and I heard about it, I was like destroyed. Like, cause I thought like this is going to be like clown masses, and like we're enshrining clown masses and stuff like that. And I remember going to mass that day just like with a stone in my stomach. Like, I was like, I was so depressed, and I didn't know like what to think about it. I just was like, this is like awful. This is so sad. And, you know, I had also started to hear about like Ubi Petrus and Jay Dyer, and they were saying a lot of things about Eastern Orthodoxy that like I had never encountered and stuff like that. I was like I legitimately started to struggle in my faith, and I was like, should I have been like Greek Orthodox? Like what's going on? And it wasn't until me and my family took a trip to South Dakota, and I'm sitting down, I'm kind of like just thinking, um, I'm thinking, and like we're driving on the trip, and I had a lot, like I was really not happy. And at this time in my journey of faith, like I didn't like being Catholic. Like it was like painful for me. It felt like every other day it was like ripping off a band-aid. And I couldn't handle the like idea that like ever since 1968, like we've been under this like cloud basically. Like it was like so hard for me to like handle that and like be Catholic handling that. And so I like really thought about it. And I like remember watching the Michael Jones video shortly after TC came out. And like at first I got pissed at what a lot of at like a lot of what he was saying. And I was like, he's just stupid and dumb or whatever. But I was like, wait, he's like actually kind of making some good points, stuff like that. I was like, huh. And I like continue to think, and I was like, I was listening to Michael Lofton at this point, and I was like listening to Lofton, and I had kind of dismissed Mike at first and kind of said, yeah, he's like a Novus Ordoite or whatever. But like, I was like, he's making good points too. And so, I just started thinking about this the entire trip and what have you. And, my confessor had also told me about my addiction. He was like, he absolved me, but he was like, I don't want you to come back to confession until you've nipped this in the butt. So I was like, shoot, I have to tell my parents finally. Yeah. Took me like 8 years to tell my parents that I was addicted to porn. How about that? And I was like struggling through all this stuff. And then I come back and a couple things happen. I was like, okay, I really need to like rethink everything that like I had thought before. And I start just listening more with like a more discerning ear and discerning heart. And I start like reading the people again who at first I dismissed, like Dave Armstrong or Catholic Answers, because I used to think that they were like normie Catholics or whatever, and that they weren't really plugged into the real truth, man. So I started to like reread their articles, and I'm like, these actually make like a lot of sense. And I don't know like why I felt this other way before. And I started listening to Lofton again, and I finally told my parents about what I was struggling with, and they really started to help me and get through it and all that. And I just was like kind of happy to be Catholic again. Like I felt like I had to like relearn my entire faith, but like I was kind of starting to become more happy being Catholic. And then that's when, I talked to a couple other friends and I started the narrow way, because I was like, man, there's so many people right now who they either think that in the life of the church, you got to be liberal or you got to be this mad rat. And I said, I want to found the narrow way as a means of saying, hey, you don't have to be either. Just be Catholic. Just love being Catholic and love being that kind of Catholic, right? I actually originally called it a Florentine Catholic because I really liked the Council of Florence, and I wanted to kind of do more Eastern Orthodox apologetics. That quickly shifted in the narrow way just because I was inspired by Jesus talking about the narrow gate in terms of salvation. And I said, I think that's like the spirituality of this age is like enter through the narrow gate, go the way that most people aren't. And so I found in the narrow way. It was very, very, very small at first, like 20 people, not even 20, like 10 and then 20 and what have you. And I used to be in Spexo's chat a long time ago, but I was never too good at chats. And so I kind of like left and I was like, I like them, but like, I'm not really in this whole chat thing. And then I like rejoined and like, I started to like be a lot more active in his chat and was like talking with people and stuff like that. And I remember when Spexo was kind of like posting about like the SSPX and stuff like that. And I coming from that background and being at that chapel and several times and seeing what that world was like and coming out on the other side with my faith intact, I was like, yo, like, my homie, I got you. And I was like sending him articles and stuff like that. And he said, do you want to come on, this episode and talk about, Vatican II vaguely and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, sure. And so, we found that first episode, and that was like life changing. And then, we did that second one that I can't even remember what it was exactly. But after that, he said, like, do you want to do this podcast together? And I was like, yeah, like, let's do it, man. Let's do it. And I was like reading a lot more, one of the things that I that was good from my Mad Trad days was I read a lot of old encyclicals, and I read like a lot of good old works that I think more people should read, right? That was a good thing. That wasn't negative whatsoever. And so like I had kind of this residual knowledge from all that like reading I had done that I wanted to like contribute and help people out in their faith life as I had been helped out, right? And so, doing this podcast and coming around full circle and stuff like that, like that's just a little story of my life. But yeah, blessed be God. And here we are today. So, Spexo, I don't know if you want to unmute or what have you, but oh wait, that's not how you said. Sorry, I forgot for a moment how you wanted to end it. Yeah.
No, it's cool. I mean, if you want to talk for a little while, I got a couple minutes, but
yeah, why don't we talk for a while? I'd love to talk to you, brother.
Sure. I don't know how I look right now because I'm kind of in my pajamas. I might just keep audio on.
Dude, I'm in my pajamas too. You're all good.
But yeah, look, I sent you a bunch of screen caps from what's it called? From the chat. Everybody was fully like supportive of you. They loved your story. They were very emotionally touched by it. Everybody's saying that they love you and that you really helped them because it's what a lot of people struggle with, and that more people need to be open about it and stuff. There was a long P session of P for Love Pinesap. So everybody loves you and supports you, and that was a beautiful story. And you are gifted with such blessings from Christ, the way you're able to talk so emotionally and openly and honestly, and it's a blessing to have met you. You have helped me more than you could ever imagine come to my faith and to help me understand things that I'm struggling with and stuff like that. So it's just absolutely awesome and beautiful, and just see that happen in other people's lives. And like I say it all the time, like there's so many times where like I always want to just get offline and like I want to just delete all my accounts and stop everything or whatever and just like live completely offline. And then like crazy things happen. Like I tell you, like people like will message me saying that like a video I made helped them or something. And like then like meeting you, like literally I asked you if you want to do the podcast before Lent, but I was getting off of the internet for Lent. And while I was off the internet during Lent, I was like, I don't even want to go back online. You know what I'm saying? Like I want to what's it called? I want to just completely stay off and not even go back or whatever. And then you were texting me like, oh, I'm so excited for this podcast we're going to do and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I can't let this guy down. Right. And then I was like, all right, whatever. I'll come back. I'll do a couple of episodes of this podcast and see how it goes or whatever. And then I'm just going to disappear and never talk to anybody again or whatever. And then we started doing it, and bro, it has just been so awesome and so amazing. And it's like not to gain anything materially or like whatever. It's just like just learning more, and it just has helped me so much wanting to be a better Catholic, and it's awesome.
Dude, I couldn't agree more. And like the biggest thing is like, it's not even having all the answers. It's just like us learning and growing as brothers together. And that's been the most meaningful thing about doing this with you, man. Like, I don't even care if like, yeah, I don't know a lot. I don't know everything. There's people who are really, 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 well educated and stuff like that on this subject. But what we have as brothers, what we have as a family doing all this, that's more precious than gold. Yeah. And that really has made me so thankful to be able to do this with you, Spec. So I cannot state that enough, brother. I cannot state that enough.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, you've like literally helped me with things that I was like struggling for years. Like the way you have like such a way with words, and people were saying it in chat that you are literally like destined to do something great, like for the faith. You know what I'm saying? Like, I already told you this, but the whole thing with like the vengeance thing, that quote stuck with me forever about, anything that our enemies have done to us, we've done to Jesus Christ 1,000 times worse and stuff. Right. About how, what else was it? I can't even think about it. The SSPX stuff. And, there was one other thing there was two other things that you really helped me with too, that I was really struggling with. And like, you just say like these little quotes or these little like, things that you take out or whatever, and like it's crazy. And there hasn't never been like a question about the faith that like you weren't able to like help me with. It's absolutely insane. But you really do just have like this way with words and speaking, and it's just so genuine and awesome, bro. But yeah, everybody's saying real human being, Pine Squad for life. It's definitely awesome.
It's awesome, man.
But yeah, like I'm trying to one thing that I learned, like, another thing that you said to me, that's what it was, that like when I was telling you, I was like I could never do what you do with like your apologetic stuff and being able to just recall information at will, that stuff you've read. Like I could read a page 1,000 times and still not retain any of it. I have to like write notes and then come back to it and stuff or whatever. And I was like, I think my thing is like sometimes I'm able to like simplify complex things, or I could like ask good questions and keep the conversation going and stuff like that. But I'm not like a good apologist. I'm not this or whatever. And you like started talking about how like we're all part of the body of Christ, and the body needs all parts of it to make the body of Christ, and everybody has their own special thing that they're good at, that they're contributing to, and we're all equally important. And I was like, bro, this kid is so good, you know. It's I clipped, I don't know if you saw my Telegram yet, but I clipped you you saying, oh, by the way, that's how I became homophobic.
I cannot wait to share that clip around, man. Oh my goodness.
I don't know if you could hear it. Hold
sorry for the strong laugh, but man, I
can you hear that? Hold on, can you hear that?
I can do such, and it's awful, and I hate it.
Dude, I wasn't a mad try. I was a pouty try.
That has to be like the new like reply for anytime like an SSPX guy comes into our chat. Like just reply with that video.
Dude, there's so many like one-liners out there that I've like attached to myself. Like there's one, I don't know if you've seen this one yet, but like Rob was doing like funny, like he was singing a song, he was like moaning to it, and I like texted back, moan on the coom part, and like people just started clipping that, and they'll like send it over and stuff like that to me, and I'm like, dude, oh my goodness.
That's one of my favorite like the non-Catholic things about our chats, is that it has like its own lore and its own memes. And then
it does.
Like I love talking about it on stream, where most of the people watching the stream that aren't from the chat have no idea what we're talking about, and it's just amazing. I find that so funny for some reason.
When we say watch the moonlight, like there's people like
TM7
going down the text, they're like, what is this thing? Is it a Marian prophecy? Is it like, dude, what is this?
What did I want to say? There was a seed that started messaging me because we were talking about the change in the catechism of the death penalty today, and he starts messaging me. He's like you're leading people to hell and stuff like that, right? And what's it called? He was like, you think that the death penalty is immoral, so that the death penalty was immoral for the last 2,000 years of church history. And I was like, that's not what it's saying. And I was like, it's a prudential change, blah, 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 the common stuff or whatever, right? And he was like, no, look what it says. It says that it's inadmissible. That means it's immoral. And then I was like, that's literally not what it says. And I sent him the CDF document, right? Which apparently changed its name, by the way. You know, the CDF changed its name last month to
what does it call itself now?
I just had it actually. CDF Catholic. It's like, what is it? Oh, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. So.
Yeah, that's not a big change.
And apparently, this is like I'm sure you know this, but you know that it was originally that was the Supreme Sacred Congregation of the Roman and Universal Inquisition. So that was like the Office of Inquisition. Then it changed its name to the Supreme Sacred Congregation of the Holy Office, and then the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, and now it's the Dicastery. Why does it keep changing its name? That's weird.
I don't know why. There's actually a funny I need to get this book, but there's a funny limerickal commentary about, or not commentary, but funny limerickal quotes from like the English bishops of Vatican II about like what was going on at the council. And the last head of the Holy Office, Cardinal Ottaviani, they like refer to him as an inquisitor, like that he wants to like burn like all these people on the stake at the council and stuff like that. That's kind of funny.
That's awesome. But yeah, so I sent the CDF document, right? And he's like, you're reading, he's like, can you cite where it contradicts what I said? And I was like, literally the second paragraph, it says that the Catholic Church has used the death penalty and it wasn't inherently evil or anything like that or whatever, right? And he was like, then he waits a couple minutes and he texts back, he goes, I just scrolled to the bottom, it wasn't even written by Pope Francis. And I was like, dude, do you not know what the CDF is? Like, do you not know how it works and how magisterial authority works? You're a seed, right? So like you have to, I'm sure you know some of your stuff, right? And he just didn't answer, and he goes, okay, what about this? Pope Benedict was giving the Eucharist to non-Catholic or whatever, and like just went to a totally different topic or whatever. Like they argue literally like Protestants, dude.
Well, they do. And like the same guy who's like in both our chats that got banned is still messaging me. And of course he's messaging me about how Pope Francis is the Antichrist in Vatican II and stuff like that. And I pwned him. So I'll brag a little bit, not because I did it, but just because his knowledge is horrendous on this. I don't mind insulting his knowledge on this because it's awful. He literally said, like, he's like, this line in Dignitatis Humanae, how do you reconcile this with tradition? I'm like, from the very same acta that the council put out. And he's like, what? I'm like, you don't know about the acta? And he was like, I don't care about a bishop's private opinion. I'm like, no. It's not a bishop's private opinion. It's the guiding interpretive document for the council. And he's like, oh, well, how do you answer this paragraph? And he like literally just ignored it. Yeah. Like everything that I said. And I'm like, dude, goofy. I'm not talking anymore. Like at this point, it's not a good use of my time. You know what I mean?
It is very vindicating though, that
it is,
because, like so many people are like, you guys got to stop talking about Vatican II and SSPX and all this stuff or whatever. And it's like, that's literally one of the two of the biggest things that are keeping people from being Catholic. You know, that's what's making people want to either become sedevacantist or go to Orthodoxy or something like that, because of all these mad trad, whatever people that are just without any nuance or like understanding of like the complete context of things, are just saying all this stuff about Vatican II and the Novus Ordo and the liturgical reforms and misinterpreting things from the documents and all this stuff. And it's like, no, there's a different way. And like me and you had like a similar type of like story going into that like mad trad thing, and like being like what is going on? Like, like for me, it was like, how do I reconcile this? All of this stuff. Vatican II is heretical, the Pope is a heretic, but it's still the true church, and Christ didn't break his promise. And then people are like, well, just be a seed. And I'm like, well, sedevacantis doesn't seem like it's really like logical. How are they going to get a new Pope? Like what are you going to become, a conclavist or whatever? It's like, and follow Pope Michael, right? It's like, there's no real like actual legitimate solution to sedevacantism. And then Taylor Marshall was just, I'm just asking questions, you know, is the Pope using a Masonic handshake with Nancy Pelosi to signal to the Russians that it's time for invasion? I'm not saying he is, I'm just asking questions, you know? And it's like, he wasn't offering any real like solutions to anything. And yeah, so it was like a really like hard path, you know? And like you talked about it too, like, and I think that's why it's so important.
I think so too, because like the biggest thing that I always say, like people are always like, we got bigger fish to fry, the liberals. Okay, here's how you disprove a liberal. Open up your Bible. Done. Our argument's over at that point. Like, liberals don't make any good points for what they're saying. What am I going to say about a liberal? Like, you're wrong? Yeah, you're wrong. And I say that all the time, right? But, like, these people pose themselves as being the pious ones. Like, oh, here's Catholicism. You wanted Catholicism, here it is. And that's how I got wrangled in, right? Because like, you know, me being some Anglican kid fresh off the boat of theology, I didn't know any of this stuff. I wanted to be the most, you know, traditional form of Catholic there was, right? So when I see people saying like, you know, traditional Catholicism and stuff like that, I'm like, I'm gonna follow where the money is, right? And it just led to such a like joyless, like sad experience. You know what I mean? Like literally thinking that like after 1958, I can't trust the very church that Christ gave his promise to. Mm-hmm. Like I have to read Jared talks about this monocle man. You want to talk about monocle man, Spexo? I was monocle man. I had 2 monocles. I was monocle man. I mean, I'm not kidding you. I would look up a document put out by St. John Paul II, and I would type the Angelus after and read about it in like an SSPX magazine before I like I even read it. I like had to trust them with like, how am I supposed to see this?
Super Heavy Booster sent a super chat. He says, God bless you, Pinesap. Incredible and touching story.
Thanks, brother. I love you, man.
Bellum Amen Spiritu, who I think is Rob, because he says, I love it when I can tell Spexo is calling me out, tickles my brickle. Actually, you weren't even the person I was in mind when I was saying that, but I'm just talking about people in general. But if you do hold that position, then you're wrong. And he says, liberals are lower than poop. Agreed, and we talk about this all the time, that liberals are far worse than the mad trads or whatever, but both of them are still in error when it comes down to it. When it boils down to like the fundamentals, it's like, okay, so we're talking about our souls, which is the most important thing. And if you're being led into error because of liberalism, or you're being led into error because of rad trad misinterpretations, right? It's just two sides of the same coin, right?
It is.
So, I mean, yes, we could say from the temporal state and the place that the church is currently physically, the visible church, I guess you could say, is definitely being subverted and attacked by liberals, and in that way, of course. But when it comes down to it, it's ultimately our souls, and either way that you're being led into error is not acceptable.
Well, and if anyone ever struggles with like wanting to know, like, how can I know truth from heresy? Number one, you can trust everything from the Vatican. The Vatican's not going to lead you into error. Number two, if it's like maybe a non-infallible source or something that you're like, I want to know, literally get like, I mean, this book was written by Reverend J.B. Lemmius under Pope Pius X, and actually has a papal approbation from him. I got it today, but I had read it a long time ago online. A Catechism of Modernism. If you're ever struggling with a question, just open up something from, again, church authorities on how to think about something. I mean, there's plenty of resources to help out if you ever hear something that's like, I don't know how to think about this thing. Again, not from the Vatican, because we can trust the Vatican, but like from a particular bishop saying a particular thing or something like that. There's plenty of spiritual fathers and saints, and again, the church herself to consult, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Owl said, so Jimmy Aiken, appreciator, said, rad trads are like flies, liberals are like mosquitoes. And then Owl G says, what does that make us? That makes us Catholics. We are Catholics. That's it. No asterisks, right? Is that what you said? No asterisks?
No asterisks.
I don't even like the term. I mean, I say I'm a glad trad or whatever just because it gets people mad. But like glad trad, it's just, I'm just Catholic, dude. Like it's not,
yeah.
It's like I follow the faith. I'm traditional in the sense that I submit and I am obedient to the church. That is traditional. That's traditionalism. Traditionalism isn't relying on your own personal interpretation. It isn't critiquing the bishops and the Holy Father and imparting uncharitable intentions on them. That is the opposite of tradition. And this guy, the Sede Vacantis, posted something about Pope Benedict giving the Eucharist to like some Protestant or something. And that was like scandalous or whatever. And so I was like looking at all this stuff or whatever, and like there was like saying, oh well, he converted into Catholicism secretly and he believed in the Eucharist and Mary and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, but if he wasn't officially Catholic, like why would the Holy Father like allow him to give him the Eucharist or whatever? And then you sent me the thing by River Run, and River Run said, I trust the Holy Father knows who's in the appropriate amount of communion to give the Eucharist or something, right?
Yep. And I mean, he's right. Like, if we trust the Holy Father, he's got it covered. It's in the Holy Father's hands. I don't need to. I mean, that's I don't care to call it that. Grug brain Catholic.
Yep.
Pope said it good, so me like it. But I mean, that's not a dumb take either. I mean, St. Ambrose of Milan's commentary on Psalm 40 literally says, where Peter is, there's the church. Mm-hmm. So if Peter's not there, the church ain't there. You know what
Christ
I mean?
Christ said himself, like, have faith like children, right?
Absolutely.
Have faith like children. Like, okay, God said this, the Pope said this, like, this is what the church teaches. That's what we're going by. I don't care what you say. Like, it doesn't matter,
Church is spoken.
Yeah.
Simple as.
Yep.
Turning Point Catholic.
So true. Oh, man. All right, bro. I guess
right.
that was pretty good. Good 2 hours. Awesome story. Awesome conversion story. Yeah, man. I think I'm gonna call it a night.
Awesome, bro.
All right, bro. God bless. Thank you for your story. What is today? It's Saturday. I'm working 4 to 12 tomorrow. maybe we'll try for Sunday night. If not, we'll try Catholic Hangout next week, and then we'll start our Vatican II series again. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Awesome, man. God bless you. Talk to you later. Bye.
God bless you. Talk